Alrighty, so we're going to continue our series today on the Big 11. This is our 5th week of this series, and we're going throughout the Bible, and we want you throughout this series to gain a better understanding of God's Word. We want you to learn the importance of studying Scriptures, and we want you to make it a habit of daily getting into God's Word. We need God's Word in our life. We need to be reading it, studying it, and most importantly, obeying it. Now, so far, we've gone through Adam and Eve. We've talked about Noah and the flood. We've gone through Abraham and Isaac, and we've talked about Noah and the Passover. Now, today, I'm really excited. We get to talk about David and Goliath. David and Goliath. I mean, this is one of the most well-known stories of all time, whether in church or not. Everybody knows about the story of David and Goliath. Now, 1 Samuel talks about this, and I believe it's in your bulletin. I'm not going to read the entire scripture, but I've clipped it into parts to get the main gist of it. Now, 1 Samuel 17, starting in verse 1, it says, "Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle the Israelites. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and prepared themselves to battle against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath. Then David said to King Saul," we're skipping ahead now, "Then David said to King Saul, 'Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant, your servant, will go and fight with this Philistine.' And Saul said to David, 'You're not able to go against this man to fight him, for you are only a boy, and he's been a man of war from his youth.' But David persisted, and he said to Saul, 'Your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it, and I delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck it, and I killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God.' Moreover," David said, "the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." And Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." Then he took his staff in his hand, and he chose for himself 5 smooth stones from the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, in a pouch which he had, and his sling was in his hand. And he drew near to the Philistine. So Goliath came and began drawing near to David. And when he looked about and saw David, he despised him, for he was only a boy. Goliath said to him, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. Goliath said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and to the beasts of the field." And then David said to him, "You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you, and I will take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, and that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with a sword or a spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." So it was, when Goliath arose and came and drew near to meet David, David hurried and ran towards the army to meet Goliath. Then David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it, and it struck Goliath in his forehead. And it had such force that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell his face down to the earth. David prevailed over Goliath with a sling and a stone, and he struck the Philistine down and killed him. Now, as beautiful and as elegant as my voice is describing this to you, I think it's a lot better to actually be... Why'd you laugh so hard at that? I think it's better if you can actually visualize it. So we have a small clip from the Bible miniseries to actually kind of give you a better description and a visualization of this battle. Check it out.
To secure the promised land, the Israelites must defeat the Philistines. But King Saul has lost God's blessing. And now he faces the Philistines' greatest champion. Goliath.
Will one of you fight me? Israelites! You win! And the Philistines will be your slaves. I win. And you will be our slaves.
Someone must fight him! Not you, Jonathan. The warrior who defeats him will be a rich man!
Not one man in Israel! Not one of God's people!
I'll do it.
David, you're no soldier, you're a shepherd.
Yes, a shepherd. As I protect my sheep, God will protect me.
Where is your faith? Where is your God?
I will kill him.
You'll need this.
I'll be better without it. Yea, though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. You are with me. Thy rod and staff, they comfort me. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life.
Israel has found a champion! Don't waste my time, little boy. You're too young to die.
I will fight you!
Now, that was a little bit better than me just telling you that to give you more of a visualization. Now, there are some incredibly powerful points that we can gain from this story of David and Goliath. And this first one is so incredibly important. I really want you to get this, that private devotion will precede public victory. Your private devotion to God will precede your public victory. Now, there's a reason the phrase David and Goliath is as much as part of our vocabulary now, thousands of years after the event actually happened. This isn't just a story, it actually happened, but it's still around today. People still talk about this story because it was such a total shock to everybody except for David. David was the underdog, which no one expected him to defeat Goliath. The odds were extremely long. Only David believed that he could win. Now, if you went to Vegas and you bet on David winning, you would have walked away with tens of thousands of dollars more than what you put down because no one else, you would have been the only one who bet on David. David's victory was incredible. No man before David even came close to winning against Goliath. No man went even to fight Goliath because they were so scared. The Bible says that for 40 days, morning and evening, Goliath went out and stood before the Israelites and called out to them for 40 days, but no one would go to fight him. Now, I keep up with some fighting a little bit, and if there's ever a match to where one of the fighters gets hurt, there is always, within a few hours of that person pulling out of the fight, there's always someone who is stepping up to fight. Whether it's a week away or 3 days away, there's always someone willing to stand up and fight. Because someone wants to win. People want to be victorious. But in that entire country, the entire army of the Israelites, there was not one person for 40 days of Goliath calling out to him that they were willing to go. This was the victory above all victories. And thousands of years later, people still reference this great feat. Now, David and Goliath. Goliath was massive. He was huge. He was the theologians say that he would have been 9 feet 6 inches tall. His shield would have been taller than David. The rod of his spear would have been similar to a 4x4 piece of wood. Just the tip of his spear weighed about 15 pounds. Now this means that not only was Goliath just tall, but he was incredibly strong. And he had been trained to become a warrior since he was only a boy. Now David, he was the complete opposite. He was not a warrior. He was a shepherd. He was known for writing songs. He was the psalmist. He was known for writing poetry. If this was high school, Goliath would have been at the popular table crushing soda cans over his head while David sat alone writing in a notebook. David was probably about 15 years old when he fought Goliath. That's why Saul said to him when he volunteered, "You cannot fight because you're only a boy." Now, why was he even at the battlefield? David wasn't there because he was in the army and he was fighting. No, the only reason David was even at the battlefield is because he was delivering pizza to his brothers. Now that's VeggieTales version, but he was there delivering lunch. He was there delivering food to his brothers. He wasn't there because he was a warrior, but his brothers needed some pepperoni pizza. And so he went to give them some food. If you were taking the odds, this is the longest of all shots. It would have been a longer shot for David to win than the Cavaliers beating the unbeatable Warriors coming back from a 3-1 deficit to beat Mr. Steph Curry. This was a longer odd than that. Now, remember, just a side note here, long before this battle even happened, David, he was anointed by the prophet Samuel to become king. But not really everyone knew that. That was really a private event. Now, this was David's first public moment in the eyes of the Israelite. But he was ready for it. How was he ready for it? Was this just a lucky shot? Was he just hyped up on candy and Mountain Dew that he thinks he can go and fight Goliath? Why did he think he could take on this giant? It's because David's private devotion to God prepared him for such a dramatic public victory. David already knew that he could handle this public spectacle that was Goliath because God moved in him in the private times. David spent time with God daily. Countless hours, not just on Sunday mornings when there was church, but David, during his private time daily, spent time with God. He wrote in one of the Psalms, Psalm 63, "Early will I seek thee." Clearly, David had been building a habit of seeking God long before this public victory. Before he had victory, he spent countless hours in private devotion with God. Now, there's a lot of people that can act very spiritual in public, but that's the only time spirituality crosses their mind. And when you only act spiritual in public, that's not truly God being in you, but that's you putting on a fake exterior to have a better appearance. But not David. He didn't have the appearance of a warrior, but on inside he had God in him, and he truly was a warrior. He was a simple shepherd, but he was faithful. Listen to this. He wasn't king yet, but he depended on God and spent time with God as if he had the responsibilities of a king. He wasn't king yet, but he depended on God and spent time with God as if he had the responsibilities of a king. Acts 13:22 talks about God testifying about David, and God says, "I have found David, a man after my own heart. He will do everything that I want him to do." Man, I would love for God to say that about me. David had been preparing for this public moment his entire life. He was faithful to God in private, and because of that, God used him in public. Be faithful to God in obscurity, and God will reward you publicly. Show up for God in private and watch him show up for you in public. Some of you want to succeed in your jobs so bad. Some of you want your bosses to notice you so bad. Some of you want to move up in your company so bad. Are you spending time with God? Because God gives favor to those who are close to his heart. Now I want to brag on my wife for a little bit. My wife, we moved here, and she didn't work for a little bit because she really wanted to, get to know everyone in the church and wanted to, work full time and with you guys and take part in that. But about a year and a half ago, she got a job here, and she works at Williams Memorial. She works at the preschool over there in Moores Lane. And when she started out there, she started off as a teacher's aide. That was just a position that was open. She loves children. That's what she loves. Her passion is working with children. And so she started off as a teacher's aide just to get her foot in a door. Now, a year and a half later, they moved her up and promoted her to a full-time teaching position. Now, she was working full-time, well over full-time there, but now she's the full-time, on-salary teaching position within a year and a half of being there. There are people there who have been there for about 10 years plus, who have been begging, who have been wanting for a full-time teaching position, but they gave it to her who's been there a year and a half. Now, she works her tail off. She's an incredible worker. I mean, there's more to it. I mean, you can't be lazy and just expect God to do it. I mean, she's an incredibly hard worker, but she's also close to God's heart. And God gives those close to his heart favor. Some of you want to be noticed so bad in your workplace. Work hard and get with God. God will move you up. God will take care of it. The battle is not flesh and blood. The battle is the Lord's. Suppose you were to come up to someone in the woods working feverishly to saw down a tree. What are you doing, you ask? Well, can't you see, comes the impatient reply. I'm sawing down this tree. Well, you look exhausted, you exclaim. How long have you been at it? Over 5 hours, he returns, and I'm beat. This is hard work. Well, why don't you take a break for a few minutes and I'll sharpen your saw? I'm sure it would go a lot faster. I don't have time to sharpen the saw, the man says. I'm too busy sawing. A lot of us, we're too busy sawing and working hard and doing everything in our power, and really what we need to do is spend some time with God and sharpen our axe, sharpen our saw. Oliver Holmes says, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. So many of us focus on the future and what we can do, or so many of us focus on the past, but really we need to focus on the here and now with God. God will take care of the future. What we need to do is take our time and be sharpened. Sharpen your axe. If you want to be successful in life, get close to God. If you want God to save your son or daughter, spend time on your knees praying. If you need God to bring healing, spend time praying more than just on Sunday morning during worship. Pray. If you need God to move in your life, pray. Pray when you wake up. Pray when you're driving in your car. Pray when you're on your lunch break. Pray when you're walking in Walmart. Pray before you go to bed. Pray. Our students are getting ready to go to youth camp next week, I believe. And every year at camp, almost every single student who goes to camp experiences God in a powerful way. I mean, it does not fail. Any camp that I've been to, any youth group that I've had, any youth group that I've gone to, everyone experiences God in a powerful way. And it's because that week of camp, or those 5 days at camp, their whole focus for the whole week is on God. When they wake up, their focus is on God. During service, their focus is on God. When they go to bed, their focus is on God. Yes, there's the fellowship time and the fun and all that, but their focus for that whole week of camp is on God. We do our devotions together. We have our group time together. We have our services together. And the whole week, their focus is on God. And you know what? God shows up. And really, that They call it camp experiences. Oh, when we go to camp, God just really shows up, and it's a camp experience. But really, those camp experiences should happen every day of your life. It shouldn't just be a week at camp that God shows up, but it should be a daily thing. Get in the habit of spending time with God. Not just a day here or a day there or a week of camp here. The point of church or the point of camp is meant so that you can be charged up and then take that momentum and build into your life a regular habit of spending time with God. If the only word that you get is here on Sunday morning, you're doing it wrong. You need more than that. Because you know what? Me, Pastor Jimmy, we can only tell you so much. And I'm not even that great of a preacher. You need to get in your word with God. You can't depend on me. You can't depend on Pastor Jimmy to give you all the word that your body needs. You need to be a self-sufficient, a self-feeding Christian. Mark Batterson says, show me your habits and I'll show you your future. Now the second thing that we can learn from this story is to guard your heart. Guard your heart because it's the most important thing about you. Now when the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king of Israel, all Samuel knew was that it was going to be one of the sons of Jesse. That's what God told him. Go to Jesse and one of his sons will be king. And so he asked Jesse to present all of his sons before him. And Jesse called almost all of his sons, all of the tall, all of the strong, all of the handsome. And Samuel surely thinks, man, one of these must be the next king. But look at what God says to Samuel in 1 Samuel 16. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. In God's kingdom, in your Christian walk, the most important thing about you is your heart. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything that you do flows from it. Now, guess who wrote this proverb? It wasn't David, but David's son, Solomon. I wonder how many times David said to his son, how many times David spoke to Solomon, keep your boundaries up. Watch what you desire. Keep your eyes fixed on the goal. Regularly search your heart for contamination. A person can look great on the outside, but if a person's heart is ugly or wicked, that's not right. Now David had plenty of opportunities to allow his heart to become angry or contaminated. I mean, David was picked on by his brothers. When Samuel came to anoint the king, his dad thought him so unworthy that he called every single one of his brothers except for him. How do you think that made David feel? When David comes to bring food to his brothers against the battle of the Philistines, they're calling him names. They question his character. They're not being nice to him at all. Later we see how he serves Saul so faithfully, and yet Saul treats him horribly. Saul lies to him. Saul tries to kill him multiple times. His wife even mocks him and ridicules him. But perhaps those words of Samuel kept ringing in his heart. God does not look at the outward appearance, but God looks at the heart. David is our example of the importance of not allowing yourself to hate anyone. To not let any seed of bitterness grow in your heart. To forgive others who have hurt you. To refuse to be a negative person. How is your heart today? Is it pure? Is it clean? Is there any bitterness in there? Is there any anger in there? Is there any grudges in there? If so, let it go. Give to God and trust Him to give the justice. Third thing that I think we can learn from the story. Oh, this is a fun one. Honoring authority results in spiritual promotion. Honoring authority. Can those two words even go together? Honoring authority results in spiritual promotion. David's relationship with Saul illustrates this so incredibly clearly. Saul was so cruel to David. Why? Because he was jealous of him. Now, before you judge Saul too harshly, try to remember that David was anointed to become king of Israel while Saul was still alive. That's like your boss telling someone that they're going to get your job with you standing right next to them. Saul lied to David. Saul betrayed him. Saul tormented him. Saul made David into a fugitive, an enemy of Israel. He hunted him down and tried to kill him multiple times, even though David did nothing wrong. But how did David respond to that? 1 Samuel 18 is a story of David coming up on Saul while Saul was unaware. And at this time, Saul was trying to kill David. And David comes up to Saul in a cave, and his men are saying, "Kill him, end this now, and become the ruler, become king." And after his men find Saul in a cave, and all the men say to David, "Kill him," this is what he said: "The Lord forbid that I do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch out my hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord." So David restrained his servants with these words and did not allow them to rise against Saul. And Saul got up from the cave and went on his way. David reiterates this point in Psalms 105. He says, "Do not touch my anointed ones, do my prophets no harm." David refused to be disloyal to the king, even though Saul was a wicked and horrible leader. David refused to be disloyal, even though he was following a wicked and horrible leader. As a result, David is promoted to become king and leads Israel into its most prosperous period of all time. In all of her history, David becomes king into its most prosperous period. This is a clear principle from the Bible. If you honor authority, even the ones you don't like, we don't like that part. If you honor authority, even the ones you don't like, it will go well with you and God will bless you. Romans 13:1, let every person be subject to the governing authorities put over them. For there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God. Hebrews 13:17, obey your leaders, your teachers, your coaches, your pastors, your bosses, anyone in authority, obey them and submit. Oh, we hate that word, submit to them, for they are keeping watch over you. Let them do this with joy, not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you. 1 Peter 5:5, likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourself, all of you, with humility towards one another, for God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Be subject to governing authorities. For none of those in authority, all of those in authority, I should say, have been instituted by God. But you don't know, Pastor, what it's like to work under my boss. You don't know the authority that God has placed in my life. No, I don't. But has he tried to kill you? Because that's what Saul did to David multiple times, and David still says respect and obey and submit. Oh, Pastor, there's no way. I mean, I know it's in the Bible, but there's no way that's really true. There's no way that God would allow an Obama or a Hillary or a Trump to become our leaders. Are you kidding me? There's no way that God instituted that. Yes, there is, and yes, he has. Now, listen to this. Maybe God keeps on giving us terrible leaders so that the church might actually wake up out of the sleep that they're in and go out and do something in this lost and dying world. Jesus says that the harvest is great, but the workers are few. Is it because all the workers are just sitting on church on Sunday and doing nothing else throughout the week? That's exactly true of what's going on today. There's a world of lost and dying people, but we're too cozy in our nice little church complaining about Hillary. Here's what Jesus should have said: the harvest is great, and the amount of complainers is greater. The church, we need a wake-up call. Your family, your friends, your co-workers are on their way to hell, but we're worried about Obama talking about guns? That's what we're worried about? That's what we post on Facebook? Many of your children have such an apathy to them, and a wave of apostasy has swept over this generation, but you're worried about Hillary's emails? All we do is complain and whine and gripe. Well, this lost and dying world is on their way to hell. And we whine and we complain and gripe about the leaders God has instituted over us. Maybe he keeps on giving us bad leaders so that we do something. We got to do something, church. Got to do something. Now, to be clear, we have to do our part. We have to vote. We have to do everything that we can to put as godly of a leader as there is in position. We have to do our part. But when it doesn't happen, we can't complain. We can't gripe. Because guess what? As much as your vote is important and matters, God's vote is more important. And whichever president or whichever leader that we have next, I don't know. But God instituted them. And you know what? I'm not worried about it because God's got us in his hand. I'm really not worried about it because you know what? If they might both be terrible. I don't know. Even if they're horrendous, whatever leader we get, and they really make North Korea mad and North Korea bombs us, I don't know. I'll be in heaven. So you know what? I don't care. Seriously, I do not care. God has instituted them over us, and he's got us in his hands, and I'm going to do everything that I can to raise up this country that we live in, to raise up this city with men and women of God. Now, each week we've been talking about the scarlet thread of redemption, and this is how the story of Jesus is intertwined throughout the entire Bible and every story of the Bible. Now, how is David and Goliath foreshadowing the work of Jesus? Jody, you can come on up. Now, the Israelites cannot go up against Goliath. They cannot do it. They need a substitute. Now, when David goes out to battle, he's not a full-grown man, but he's a mere boy. Virtually, he is a sacrificial lamb. But God uses his apparent weakness as the means to destroy the giant, and David becomes Israel's redeemer, so that his victory, David's victory, will be imputed to them. All of the Israelites, the entire country of Israel, gets the fruit and the spoils of war, even though someone else won the victory for them. Jesus took on the impossible giants in my life. He took on the sin. He took on the law of God. He took on death for me. I could never fight that. I could never go up against that. But you know what? Jesus, he fought the battle for me. And because of that, I get victory. I did nothing. Literally, if anything, I've messed it up even more. But I get the fruit and the spoils of Jesus dying on the cross for me. I will never have the courage to fight the ordinary giants in my life. I will never have the courage, I will never have the strength to fight suffering, disappointment, failure, hardship, and criticism without the power of the grace of Jesus. I just want all of us in this place to spend a little bit of time with God today. Just a little bit. It's not even 11:30, so we got time. I want us all to spend some time with God, examining our heart. And they're going to put some questions on the screen in just a second, and I want you to just read them and ponder them and think about it. How is your walk with God? How is your heart? How is your attitude to authority? And think about those things. Question them. I mean, if you want to stand, you want to come to this altar, that's all right. If not, just take some time sitting there and close yourself in. Shut your eyes and just close yourself in with God. So just for a few minutes, if you want to come to this altar, great. If not, everyone just in your chairs, spend some time with God pondering these questions.